our ideas about who we are, the work that we do, and the things that we can accomplish are often ingrained in us at a very early age and then repeated over time. And we can take conscious control of our own programming. Now, in the world, there are infinite jobs, and no one job is better than any other job. There might be a job that's better for you than another person, but just because one person is making more money than another person obviously doesn't make that person better. I think this is a core principle of success consciousness that we have to integrate into ourselves so that as we work towards our own definition of success, we can understand that there are underlying principles and there are goals that we all strive for. And at the same time, we can set our own agenda. We can decide what we want to work for as opposed to having someone else or even say what your teacher told you 20 years ago or whatever. Having that be the underlying program isn't necessarily going to be what we want. It's up to us to look at our own internal software and to say, okay, which of these programs are outdated, which ones can we update? And it's interesting because there are great minds that have come along that have had interesting, revolutionary, influential ideas. And one of those people, for example, is Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill, like 100 years ago, wrote the book Think and Grow Rich. And that book has been a staple in the business and entrepreneurship and success communities for, basically the better part of a century. So there is something to these core ideas. And I feel that it's important to break those down. So what Napoleon Hill did in his book was really define success consciousness. And there have been many authors, many people that have written books about it or just lived that as their lives. And in that, I think what Napoleon Hill did in this book was make these ideas accessible to people in a way that they can apply it into their own lives. Whether someone was a successful business magnate or even some sort of spiritual teacher reaching higher realizations about the nature of reality, oftentimes those people don't necessarily translate their ideas very well. And it is only in understanding those people through their example that we can even begin to emulate that level of success. And at the same time, when those hidden principles are brought to our awareness and to our attention, sometimes they're incredibly simple and obvious. And I think a lot of the greatest achievers or teachers often come back to these incredibly simple ideas. So for Napoleon Hill, there are 5 big ideas that I would like to focus on. There are a lot of ideas in the book, and I highly recommend reading Think and Grow Rich. But the 5 that I want to focus on, I think, are the most obvious, and perhaps the things that will seem, I guess they seem obvious, but in application or in real life, they don't always show up that way, or they don't always get practiced that way, or they're not a part of the cultural narrative, or there's something in the way in the cultural narrative. Okay, so Napoleon Hill's first big idea, huge idea, revolutionary, you have to really want it. So desire. Whatever you want to do or whatever your goals are, you have to have some level of passion. I think that the Stoics and the Zen philosophers and the minimalists and maybe even the yogis would say it's good to be dispassionate. It's good to have a level of non-attachment to your goals. But that doesn't mean you don't strive for those goals, or that doesn't mean you can't have a healthy ambition. You just have to work without like wanting for the fruits of your labor. You have to work because you love to work. And that when you work because you love it, then you generate magnetism, and the things that you do want naturally come to you. So it's a place of consciousness. It's a place of perspective within your own being about how you're interacting with the world, right? It's always a give and take, but it should be much more of a give focus for you, because everything that you give will always come back to you exponentially, okay? So that's the first thing, is having a healthy desire is important. Okay, next. In the world of education, there's a lot of training for generalized knowledge. And most people who start businesses, I think it's pretty much everybody, you would say, they have some form of specialized knowledge, something that differentiates them, that allows them to provide something of value that is not commonplace. And if it is commonplace, it's something that is in high demand that people need. So when you think about, okay, what is something that I can do in terms of things that I can offer people? Okay, well, one of the biggest things is knowledge. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm directly delivering knowledge, but it could be you just know how to fix a washing machine, right? And maybe not everybody knows how to fix a washing machine. And people will pay you to fix a washing machine because that is specialized knowledge that you have. It doesn't have to be like, I know how to synthesize DNA or whatever. There are varying like orders of complexity that I think there's a law of diminishing returns, where you might get paid more to synthesize DNA than to fix a washing machine, but somewhere in between in terms of complexity, it's like you don't need, 2 PhDs to fix a washing machine. And it's just the level of training versus the level of payment, let's just say, doesn't always correlate. Okay. So it's just a simple idea of like how to get started. Is specialized knowledge does not mean you have to go to school for 12 years or whatever, like 12 years beyond a college degree or whatever, or even beyond high school. Like it just means that there is specific things that we can learn, often those things we are not going to learn in school. And that is where a lot of the bread and butter in terms of the businesses that we can start really lie. So just figuring out what your niche is and how you can build up specialized knowledge. Okay, so once you have the knowledge and the desire, right? Next, you need imagination. And we all have imagination. It's natural that we are built with this, beautiful mind that we have. And the power of imagination is something that isn't always trained in us. It's something that we just take for granted a lot of the time, that, it's stressed, say, when you're a kindergarten or whatever, but by the time you're, leaving high school or college or going out into the real world, it becomes, less of an important thing that people stress. And I think that's sad in many ways. I feel that the reliance on the analytical mind is what gets us into trouble a lot of the times, when what we're looking at in culture right now is, trying to solve problems through technology, when really it would just take a little bit of thinking, like a change in our thinking or a change in our actions or the way our society works, rather than trying to build technological systems always to solve the problems. I think that that's a very left brain, and I don't think that imagination is necessarily completely right brain, but it's just a matter of merging the two, using your logic, using your intuition to do something that makes sense, right? But is also a novel idea. Okay, so that's imagination, is how do you come up with new solutions to old problems? I think that's a good way of defining it when you're talking about businesses. Here's an old problem. These are the solutions that are not working, and how do we come up with something new and different? What is the missing link? Okay, so that's the point of imagination. Okay, persistence, and really, I think persistence goes along with just judgment and all of the things that are required to really execute. So you have planning, right? Decision making. How do you get things done? And that's where persistence comes in. It's, how do you take a break when you're exhausted so that you don't completely fall off the wagon, but you are able to, get up and keep going, right? How do you build what you're doing in a way that is feeding you, in a way that is going to be meaningful enough for you to get up every day and work on it? So that's persistence. And when you have all of these like internal factors, right? You have your desire, you have specialized knowledge, you have imagination, and you have your persistence, your grit, your discipline, whatever you want to call that. When you have that built up in yourself, it's important to recognize like how energy is moving through your body. So this is an interesting piece, and in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill talks a lot about our sexual energy and transmutation of that energy, because it is the strongest like stimulation of our minds. Basically, is that drive to create, procreate, however you want to say it, is a very strong drive for many reasons, but mainly it's because it's a survival mechanism of the species. And when we are able to understand how that energy works in our body, and we can bring that energy up, lift it up into, from yoga speak, like our higher chakras, when we can transmute that energy and understand that fundamental life force, that creative energy, is what we can use for creating a business, or any kind of work. Like when we can use it to create ideas. Basically, you would call these, let's just say, intellectual children, so to speak, as opposed to, how many people start a new business and call it their baby, right? Like it's a thing. And anyway, so just when you have all these pieces together, you have your persistence, right? Your desire, your discipline, your focus, your ability to bring everything together and grow something magical. Then it takes people, right? You need people. So the last point, the fifth point, is people, okay? So positive people. You are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, okay? So it's just important to remember that when we are working on ourselves, not to forget that there are people like us in the world. You are not alone. Whatever you're working on, like, there are lots of people like you. And there are more opportunities to connect with those people now more than ever. So that's like the final important piece. If you have all the other things going for you, I think that can be a big missing link, is thinking that you have to go it alone, thinking, you have to hustle, you have to grind, like nobody else knows what you're going through, etc. Like, and people are at different phases. Like, just because someone isn't hustling now, maybe it's because they've already gone through that, or maybe it's because they want to go through that. You don't always have to judge people for, being poor or being lazy or whatever you like project onto them, because those are the things that, bother you about yourself or what. So it's like, if you see somebody that is working on something and they are driven, right? It's really important to be around people that are where you want to go. And at the same time, that shouldn't be your only focus, or like excluding everybody else from the picture. You want to have role models. You want to have peers or influences that you look up to. And you also want to be able to like have relationships of people that are also like you, trying to figure it out. And I think at some level, we're all trying to figure it out. So just knowing that about everybody, we're all trying to figure it out. So those are the big pieces from Napoleon Hill. You have your desire, your specialized knowledge, your persistence, and your people. And what is the other thing? Your imagination. Okay, so remember that this is something that you can always take with you. It's not necessarily unique to Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. Just the fact that it's an easy place to dive in to this idea of success consciousness, and how we focus our energy, and how we really train our thoughts to be able to say, okay, I don't need to think that thought. I can think this thought. And the better we get at that, the more we really like see the outcome in our lives. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.